Hello and welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads alongside Shawn Francis. I am Brian Altunian. And today's guest is author Daryl Calfee, who wrote an amazing book to his child about tragedy. I'm not laughing at the subject matter, but turning tragedy into a straight, no bull conversation. And in fact, it's called Let's Skip the Bull. We're going to hear an amazing story about resilience and moving forward and the things that happen in life after a tragedy. Stay tuned for another episode of Just Two Dads. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Altunian along with Shawn Francis, episode 206 of our Just Two Dads podcast. It's something we started about 4 years ago and decided to shine a spotlight on those folks who are doing amazing things for the special needs community. But more importantly, we keep finding amazing warriors, superheroes that are taking a situation and turning it into something that benefits other people, whether that's a diagnosis, a skill, an activity, a service, or even in this particular case, a tragedy, with the storytelling of which is so fascinating that it serves so many people. I think you're gonna get a lot of value out of it today, out of today's conversation with Daryl. We're excited to get started. I want to thank Billy Footwear for all of his support for our podcast. And Billy makes adaptive footwear for people of all ages, sizes, abilities. And the story about Billy Price, CEO, is amazing. So without further ado, I'm going to throw it over to Shawn to welcome Daryl to the show formally and to jump in. Hey, Shawn, send it over to you, buddy.
I always say each time we do an episode, I'm so thankful for the platform, the opportunity, being able to connect with amazing people. So much more so that I'm a little more perplexed than usual, and I can't really explain why in terms of where we begin. I think there's so much value, kind of want to just jump right into it. But our guest today is a father and unintended author. Book writing found him as opposed to the other way around, and an emotional warrior, if you will. And he's written an amazing book based on lessons that you teach your children in the face of tragedy. And his name is Daryl Calfee. Daryl, welcome to Just Two Dads.
Hey, thank you guys, Shawn, Brian. I really appreciate you guys taking the time.
Oh,
It's awesome. Glad to have you here.
It's the honor is ours. So the book is called Let's Skip the Bull. Painfully honest notes on life and work. Lessons from dad after your mom died. Now, I was thinking of that the other day. It's like skip the bull. It says that, but then the subtitle, Lessons from your dad after your mom died. That's as straight a punch as one can possibly throw at life. And so you might be jumping the gun here. In terms of order and where we go, we'll get on touch on your origin and everything. But the one thing that really strikes me in our conversation with you, in our pre-show conversation and here, and and even your demeanor, given what you've been through, which we'll get to, I have to ask you, because I was thinking it just before we began recording, is where do you get your strength? Because you seem like you just have so much of it. You really seem at peace.
I think I'm just comfortable with who I am. Like I get that it took a while to get here, right? Like I'm 45, I'm in my mid-40s. I would say early in my 20s, I was trying to figure it out, like we all were. And so by the time I got to this point in my life, I'm really comfortable with who I am. I had the benefit of my former wife, Johanna, who passed away in 23, being really, really smart. And she helped me understand things about myself and about just human nature, psychology, because she was always curious. And one of those things was she was an excellent teacher of the Enneagram, which is an ancient personality test.
Oh, yeah. Familiar with it.
Yeah. And so for years, she was teaching teams and organizations and nonprofit groups all about the Enneagram in order to help them work better together. So we had been through some really tough stuff in our marriage. We'd been through marriage counseling. We'd been through individual counseling. And when she started teaching the Enneagram, she was good enough to like impart that knowledge to us in our own marriage. And it really helped me start to understand that I was made the way that I am, and it's not a mistake. And it's okay to be the way that I am if I'm healthy. There's obviously on the Enneagram, there's 9 numbers, and there's healthy versions of each number and there's unhealthy versions of each number. And so a lot of times people might use those as an excuse of like, oh, well, I'm this just because, well, that's not true. If you're in a healthy version, there's characteristics of a healthy side of that, just like there's a dark side of anything, right? So there's a dark and a light side of anything. And so one of the things that she left me with was a very clear understanding of how I'm built. And I think when I got to that point, I started to just be at peace, to your point, to be at peace with who I am. So a lot of that is also wrapped up in the fact that I had a really good father figure. I had a great grandfather figure. So my identity as a man was kind of baked into me. And so I wasn't out there looking for that. I've obviously filled the gaps in my own life with great male mentors, but I would say that I had a better start than a lot of people because I had the presence of both of these men in my life. And so you couple that with later in life finding out like, hey, how you're built. And I think it makes me comfortable with who I am.
Wow.
Love that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Johanna a little bit. So you mentioned her. So it's a little bit about the origin story. How did you guys meet? Tell us about your early days, all the great things about her that.
Yeah. So she was a pastor's kid, and we met at a place called Liberty University. So for those of you guys in the world who've heard of Liberty, good or bad, you get a lot of pastors' kids at Liberty. And it's grown to be a really big school. And at the time, it was a medium-sized school, but we were in the communications department together. And we started dating our senior year, and we ended up dating long distance because I went to New York right out of college, and she stayed in Lynchburg and went into TV news. And so long story short, we have this long distance dating relationship. We become engaged. We moved to New York, and it's really tough to get into the TV market in New York. I don't know if you guys know, but it's the number 1 market in the world. So it's difficult,
that it is,
right?
yes.
Difficult.
And so we ended up traveling back to Virginia and settling back here in Lynchburg in 2004. And she went back into TV news. And so she was on air for years and then stepped away from that in 2008. And we went into business together in a bunch of entrepreneurial efforts. We owned a regional magazine together. We worked at an advertising agency together. And then in 2010, she took her first trip to Thailand, and it changed her. So she began to work in the it's not an industry, obviously, but like she began to work in human trafficking. So helping victims, working in what you would consider like the sex trade world, with women specifically in Thailand, in Bangkok. And that was with a group called Freedom 424. And so she went from a TV personality to entrepreneur, and then into the nonprofit world, working specifically with women who were basically stuck in sex slavery. And it changed her. Like, it was this beautiful transformation of this woman who was really self-focused in the beginning to, by the time she passed away, she had given literally all of herself. And it was beautiful. It was a beautiful transformation.
Amazing. How old was she when she started doing this work?
So she would have been 2010. So she would have been about 30, early 30s when she started doing the work. And she was diagnosed with breast cancer at 38. So what you saw was this woman who started to like have this new version of herself in her early 30s, and working through all that. Like I said, we spent a lot of time in counseling. Like, our marriage wasn't perfect. And we had some individual and relational things that we were working through. And part of that evolution was her really falling in love with this work in helping others. And so we spent about 10 years alternating mission trips. So she would work in India or Thailand one year, and then I would go to Africa the next, and vice versa. And so it was a decade of shaping and reshaping us. And then along path, we had children. And so our
Um,
first,
This will be my next
I was
question.
going to ask about that. Yes.
so our first daughter was born in 2010. Her name is Ella. She's 14 today. She's on the spectrum. So she has what would have been diagnosed as Asperger's years ago. And we made her very aware at an early age that she was autistic. Like, so she was on the spectrum, and hey, here's how you're going to navigate life differently, and you're going to look at problems differently. And I always say that when Ella's going to be 26, I'm going to want to hire her in our organization. It's just getting her to 26 as a parent. Sometimes it's hard, you know.
We are very familiar with that idea.
Yeah. So I think between Joe coming to love the women that she was working with in human trafficking, becoming a mother, having a child that's on the spectrum, like all of these things really like started to break away all of the masks that she was wearing, or the old version of her was wearing when she was in TV news, right? Because it was a very self-focused industry at that time. And it was beautiful. It was a beautiful transformation. And so when she passed away in 23, so many of the people that came to her memorial said, I felt like that I was truly known by her. I felt like she was more interested in who I was as a person than anybody else I'd ever met. And really what it was at her core was she was always a curious kid. And that's what made her a great journalist. And that's what also made her really interested in human trafficking and the stories of these women and where they came from.
Sure.
So anyway, that was just like this beautiful butterfly effect for her at the end of her life, where all of the outside stuff had been stripped away. You know, when she was in TV, I remember she used to airbrush on her makeup, and our bathroom was a disaster, right? Because it was spray makeup everywhere.
Yeah.
To the point of when she died, she had no hair. She had lost like eyebrows and eyelashes. She had none of her reproductive organs remaining. She had lost her breasts. Her body hurt. She was swelling. Like all of her outside beauty that had previously been so important to her in TV news had been stripped away.
Yeah.
And yet she was the most beautiful that she had ever been, because she was really comfortable with who she was, and she was way more curious about who you were. And it was a really beautiful thing to see. It's easy to talk about. It's hard to like go through it and experience it, but it was beautiful.
That is beautiful.
You just said something really key there. You said it's easy to talk about, but it was hard to go through.
Yeah.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that, because personally, it seems like in the news as well as in life personally, there's so many people that are either diagnosed or passed away, you know, with cancer of late, that over the past couple of days has actually had me really thinking about not just my mortality, but life, and like, what do I look forward to today? What's going to get me like up and kind of happy? So that's a fantastic place to be, where it's difficult to go through, but for it to be easy to talk about. Now, and I know maybe it takes a little more self-reflection or something, but let's talk a little bit about your origin or how you were raised, because I think to get to a point where it's easy to talk about, those are gold.
Well, I grew up in middle of nowhere, West Virginia, outside of a little bitty town called Princeton, which we probably lived 15 or 20 minutes outside of that. And I think if you look at the Wikipedia page, Princeton's population is like 5,300 people. So it's pretty small. It's pretty small. So if that's that small, I lived outside of that, you know, that group. So grew up in a really small community, but we lived on 500 acres. So we had all the adventures as young boys. I'm the oldest of 3 boys. And so we did all of the outdoor things and had a great childhood, a fantastic childhood, had wonderful parents who loved us and took care of us. And then I went away to college, as did my other brothers, and we never came back. So you had 3 boys that you raised to be men. And then when we got to an age of 18, we left. And I think for my parents, they felt like their job was done. You know, which I look at a lot of parents today with kids that after COVID have come back home, and, you know, they're still funding things for them or still trying to help them through things. And so I'm sure my parents had a sense of loss of like, hey, the boys are gone. But at the same time, they probably felt like they did a great job, because we were able to be independent individuals on our own, raising our own families, those kind of things. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway,
You
so
said,
I had a great base, right? Like I had a
Yeah.
great starting point that a lot of people don't have.
Mhm.
But we weren't rich. We, lower middle class. And so I had my own insurance. I had my own phone bills. I paid for all my own books. Like I worked my way through school. And then right out of school, like I said, we went to New York. And my first job, it was for the first 2 years out of school, was in New York. So I went from the 5,300 people in Princeton, West Virginia to, New York. And it was a game changer for me because it created relationships. It introduced me to different parts of the world that I'd never been around, new experiences. It was amazing. So I'm grateful for that.
You mentioned having the men in your life, and you said a grandfather figure. Were you referring to your grandfather himself, or did you, was your dad principal in raising you, or?
Yeah. So my grandfather, who literally just passed away on Tuesday.
Oh my God.
I'm so sorry.
So sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna get messed up right now because he was 91, so he lived a long life. He was married to my grandmother for 70 years. Her name is Charlotte. She's still alive.
Beautiful.
And he just went into care like basically 3 months ago that was independent but assisted, and then within the last 2 weeks really had to go into a nursing care facility, and he was on hospice for about a day and a half, and then he passed away.
Wow.
But they say, and I take this as I just love it. I take it as with so much honor that I am the most like him.
Wow.
And good and bad, right? So
right.
Yeah, both. But if anybody knew Ralph Calfee, they knew that he loved people, that he was always connected in the community, that he would give you the shirt off of his back, that he was very hardworking. Those are the positives. The negatives were he was very impatient. He wasn't great at details. He didn't have a lot of time, that he wanted to linger. He wanted to move on very quickly. And he was hard-headed, right? So all of those things are also like personal attributes of mine. But he was such a good role model when I looked at him in relationship with my grandmother of what love looked like, because they called each other mom and dad. They kissed each other all the time in front of us. And again, I had the benefit of having grandparents who were in their late 40s when I was born.
Yeah.
So I got to see this very athletic, hardworking guy for a very long period of time. And it was a consistent presence in my life.
Wow.
And so on Tuesday, when I got the call that he was in hospice, I drove into West Virginia to just sit with him. And we talked often on the phone, but it's not the same when you're there holding somebody's hand.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I went in and sat with him and just held his hand. He's unresponsive, but I put my head on his chest and I just said, "Hey, you've left such a good legacy. We're good. The boys are all good. Our families are good. You can go. You've talked about this place called heaven for so long. I'm excited for you to be there, right? So go." And I got the call at 3:00 that afternoon that he had passed away. So I am so grateful for Ralph Calfee in my life.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, those are great stories.
So was he your dad's dad or your mom's dad? Well, he's your dad's dad, obviously.
He's my dad's dad. And my parents were really young when I was born. So I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house. When your parents are young, they're trying to work, they're trying to figure it out. I was actually born in Section 8 housing. And so they're trying to figure out how to, get the next job or make a living or finish college like my mom was when I was born. And so I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house when we were young. And so by that, I got influenced by these two amazing people, Ralph and Charlotte. And so long story short, they'd been fixtures in my life since I was born. I've known them for, now 45 years. And they've been a huge impact. My grandmother taught me how to treat a woman, which I think was really interesting. Is here she is, you would think that your grandfather would be the one that would influence you in that way. But my grandmother was the one you say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. You hold doors, you pay for dinner. My grandmother was big on chivalry, right? She was expecting that to happen. And then my grandfather was happy to do those things.
Yeah.
And so I just saw it worked out in their lives in this beautiful way. And so long story short, I spent 2, 3, 4 days a week with them on a pretty consistent basis. And anyway, I love them and I'm grateful for them.
That's
No.
amazing.
Go ahead, Brian. You were going to say something.
No, it's having certain family members that are not your parents that take the time to honor you and validate you and help you feel like you matter. It's something different than parental,
Yeah.
in a way we have that obligation as parents to tell our kids,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Some don't do
Yeah.
it, but we have obligation. But when we have other family members, it really is. That's
and
beautiful.
I see that in my friends' children as well, right? So I get to be a voice for the friends in my life, their kids, that their parents are never going to have the same voice, right? So I get to be the cool uncle or the cool friend's dad, right? Who goes to man lunch with you and talks about something you're going through at school that their dad has been banging his head against the wall trying to say the exact same thing, but it's just like this other voice. Yeah. And my grandfather was that, right? My grandmother has been that, like this other voice. And so I'm grateful for that. And in fact, Let's Skip the Bull in a way is a reference to my grandfather. So originally the title was Let's Skip the Bull. And the editor was like, hey, like, I think that might not be great for some of your audience. And I said, okay, that's great. And I'd honestly want it to be honoring for my grandfather. But the truth is like, he had this moment with me where he was a very conservative Baptist preacher from West Virginia. And so I had him in this framework all of my life. But we're out there feeding the cows one day, and he says, hey, do you think the cows ever get tired of eating this shit? Do you think they ever say, I'm tired of this bullshit? And my mind was blown. I was like, oh my gosh, my grandfather. And he was referencing the fact that we were feeding them at that time. There was chicken feces in the grain. So it was a common practice to increase the protein level of your cows during the winter, and it cut costs. So you would mix it with chicken crap. And when he said that, it blew my mind.
Oof.
And what it made me realize is that my grandfather is a man. My grandfather is human. My grandfather is not like this holy, righteous, like holier than thou type of guy. And it really made me love him even more.
Yeah.
So this whole idea of Let's Skip the Bull is kind of a reference to him in that moment. So
that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Wow.
Besides Ella, did you guys have other children?
We do. So Ella came along in 2010. Easton came along in 2013. So they're only 3 years apart. Easton looks a lot like her mom, Johanna, has a lot of the same personality traits. And then all of a sudden we decided that we weren't done. And at 40, we had Emmanuel. And Emmanuel comes with his own story. So Johanna finds out in June that she's pregnant with Emmanuel, and she's so excited. We're excited, but then all of a sudden the math sets in. We're like, oh man, we're going to be 40-year-old newborn parents. And then on August 14th, 2019, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. So about 60 days after finding out this really great news, she's struck with, I have breast cancer. I'm pregnant. What do I do?
Yeah.
So the very first question, the oncologist, Dr. Jenkins, she's an awesome woman, but Dr. Jenkins had to ask her in the oncology center was, hey, if you terminate this pregnancy, we can treat you faster. So there's not a lot of data out there on women going through chemotherapy while being pregnant. But there was a study done in Europe on about, I think it was 35 women, and they all had entered their second trimester. So the placenta is an amazing thing, and in the second trimester, it sets up, and it really will protect the child from so many things. Wow. And they felt confident that based on the data and based on past experience that they could treat her with chemotherapy in the second trimester. But what that meant was delaying her treatment at least another 30 to 45 days. And so what we were wrestling with is, does she have a mastectomy? Does she start chemo early? All those kind of things, but none of it really could happen safely until the second trimester. So she delayed her own cancer treatment in order to make sure that Emmanuel was going to be healthy. So,
wow.
How many times are you faced with a decision like that, right? A lot of times we talk about these things in theory, but when I sat in the room with that woman and she had to boldly answer that question that she was choosing Emmanuel over herself, it changes everything, man. So every time I look at him, I think about her. I think about that decision. So
yeah, it'd be interesting to ask everybody that question. I mean, that's such an amazing sort of moral, ethical,
It is, because if she said, you know what, I'm going to trust in God and begin my treatment sooner, it's going to be okay. If she did that and then something happened to him, then she has to live with that.
Yeah.
And so there's no easy choice.
That's right. And if she terminated the pregnancy at that point, I would have been in complete support of that too, because her life is super valuable to my other 2 children, to me personally. Like, I would have been in support of that, but she boldly said, no, like, I believe that, like, I can do this. And so her treatment started in the 2nd trimester. She went through chemo. She had a mastectomy while she was pregnant. She had only the ability to be sedated for 2 hours, because that's, again, all the data showed is that,
oh my gosh,
anesthesia, has its limitations for women that are pregnant and how long they want to be under, those kind of things. So she had a unilateral mastectomy while she was pregnant. And
I can't even imagine that.
No, it was crazy. And then so Emmanuel's born in March. He's born on March 14th. And I know you guys on the West Coast remember this date, because March 14th was the date that the world just completely shut down in 2020.
Yep.
And so I was trapped in a NICU, in the maternity ward of our local hospital, and I couldn't leave, because if I left, I couldn't come back.
Yeah.
And then they decided that there were going to be no visitors, so they made me leave completely. And so Johanna was there by herself in the NICU with Emmanuel for about a week after he was born. And she said it was like this really crazy dystopian experience, because you're in a vacant hotel, a vacant hospital, but it felt like being in a vacant hotel. And I could only come to the glass and deliver food from the outside. So I did that for a week, took care of my other 2 kids. And then a week later, she came home. So,
wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And then we all became stay-at-home parents.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We all learned to work from home that year, right? So at that time, I was vice president of marketing for a well-known leather company here in Virginia. And we all started working remotely. All of our trade shows became remote. And so I worked from home. I did math and spelling in the mornings with the kids, and I did, marketing in the afternoons. And it was
which also includes math and spelling. You have to do math and spelling to do marketing.
Right.
It was a wild year, man. It was a wild year. We still have photos of the kids wearing masks outside during Easter egg hunts of Easter in 2020. And we just didn't know what we were dealing with, right? So it was like, when I look back at those photos, it's crazy. They're in their Easter dresses with Easter baskets, and to try to keep everybody safe, like, we're wearing masks. And I look back at that now, and I'm like, man, we really were trying to all figure this thing out and care for each other. Meanwhile, Johanna's going through cancer at that same time. She's going through treatments. We have a baby. Like, our cortisol levels must have been
out of control. No kidding.
Yeah.
No kidding.
So, and you go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
And are you still doing marketing, Daryl? Is that still
it is something that is who I will always be. So it's a thing that I still do. I still have a core group of clients that I work for, but my primary focus has been for the last 4 to 5 years, real estate. So I get through 2020. I help our company navigate 2020, what that looks like, because nobody knew, right? And so I felt like we were at a really good stopping point at the end of that year. And I went into our president, Sackett Wood, his office. And I just said, hey, Sackett, I love you. I love our organization, but my family really needs me right now. And they knew everything that we'd been battling at home. So I walked away January 4th of 2021. And I just went full-time into our real estate business. And so I've been doing that now for over 4 years.
Wow. So you go through everything. Your faith carries you through. Johanna passes away.
Yeah.
How do you go from that and what do we do next? How am I there for my kids to writing a book about it. Tell us about the evolution of the book,
Yeah.
and I'll share the
So,
site too.
so Johanna passed away in August of 23. And you know how social media is today, right? Like you get contacted by people that you don't even know. And they're sending you condolences. You know, they're a friend of a friend of a friend. And one of those friends of a friend of a friend was a guy named Brandon Janis. And Brandon himself was a widower. Very similar story. His wife passed away from breast cancer. I think hers metastasized to her brain. And he said, "Hey, you don't know me, but you've got some friends that know me. And I just wanted to let you know that you're loved." And I was like, "Cool, thanks." You know, but this dude didn't go away. Like Brandon just kept following up. He's like, "Hey man, just wanted to let you know you're loved." And I was like, "Cool, thanks." So long story short, we created a beautiful relationship because of that. And along the way, I find out that he runs a publishing company called Blue Hat Publishing. And Brandon said, "Hey, listen, I've been through what you've been through. I think that there's a story that you have to share. It's not, you're not ready. It's not time. But when you're ready, like, I would like to help you share that story with the world." And I said, "Okay, cool." So I followed up with him after January 1st of 2024. I'd been on our New Year's trips, which we always take to the beach. And I made one of the notes for 2024, like, "Hey, I'm going to write the book this year." So I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, I'll be ready to sign April 1st. And I called him April 1st and I signed the deal and I wrote the book. So from April 1st to September 15th of 2024, I sat down every morning and wrote. And, you know, I've gotten this question from people who think that, "Hey, I want to write a book." They're like, "Hey, how do you write a book?" I said, I had no idea how to write a book. I'd never written a book before. I had written paragraphs, headlines. I'd done those kind of things for marketing all of my life, but I'd never written a book. And so all I did was literally, I put Post-it notes on the wall in my office and I said, "Hey, here's the things that I want to write about." I categorized those Post-it notes and I made those Post-it notes a Google Doc. And I just literally went through and checked off the next thing to write, the next thing to write, the next thing to write. And I had this amazing editor. Her name is Rachel Mitchell. She's a gift. She is one of those people that you think like, man, you're just a special person. Because about a month into me starting to write, Rachel reached out and said, "Hey, I want to let you know if I'm not as available as I normally am, I have been diagnosed with breast cancer myself. And I will be going through treatments and surgeries throughout this year as you write your book. So I just want to let you know I'm here. I'm reading what you're writing, but I just may not be as responsive as I normally am." And so I felt like there was somebody on the other end of the line receiving what I was writing this whole time.
Yeah.
And so, sure, I wrote this book for my 3 kids, and that was my core audience. But to know that Rachel every Friday was on the other end in an oncology center like I had been in, she was going through a chemo treatment. She had just had a mastectomy. Like, she had been through all the things. She was going through all the things that we had just been through. As I wrote, I found this freedom of just like telling her the truth. Like, hey, skipping the bull, like, "Hey, Rachel, I'm writing today thinking about you." And so she read it and received it as only a person on the other end going through something like this could. And so we formed this beautiful relationship last year. And I'm just so grateful for her because she really helped me pare down this book to be about the things that matter and help me eliminate the things that didn't. And that's why it's not longer than 104 pages because she helped me get rid of all the stuff that didn't matter. So, yeah.
If you're just catching us, we're speaking with Daryl Calfee, marketing guru, but really now author and a godfather figure for so many people. That's what I'm calling you. I don't know what else to tell you.
I don't know.
But first of all, let me just say this: what an amazing story that somebody reached out on social media and that turned into be a great relationship. That must have felt amazing, right? Out of the blue, bizarre initially, and then turned into something really spectacular. I'm going to put them up on the screen. That was Blue Hat Publishing. For anybody who wants to write a book, follow Daryl's lead.
Yeah.
And then we just had the site on the screen. Daryl, you said something a minute ago that Rachel helped you pare down what you wanted to have in the book and what is important.
Yeah.
So given what you've been through, with Johanna's diagnosis and passing,
Yeah.
a father to a daughter diagnosed with autism,
Yeah.
and the faith that's instilled in you growing up.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most important? Considering that you pare that all down, right? For the book, generally speaking, and I've never asked anybody this on the show before, but everything you've said leads me up to this moment in question, which is, what would you say in your estimation is the most important thing in life?
It's what I would want for my kids. And that is just resilience. I know that's a big word right now as we're trying to raise children in a different world, but for them to be resilient. There's a part of the book I talk about being anti-fragile. And it's this idea that the wind's going to blow on you as a tree, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for your roots to go deep and for the flexibility of your bark, essentially, right? Like the cells on the outside of that tree, it has to have pressure against it from the wind. And sure, it has to be fed with soil and water, so great nutrients, like a great foundation. But you have got to be able to learn to live under the pressure of the wind, right? And so I want my kids just to be resilient. There's times, right, like as a parent, you guys know this, where you'll test them a little bit to see just how resilient they are. And it's that moment at which you almost want to step in, that you have to be willing to go as a dad to say, okay, this is the point where they might fail, but I have to be willing to let them go just a little bit farther so they feel that this might be the moment where I want to interject. This might be the moment where I want to tell them to share, right? But I have to let them go just a little bit farther to see what they're made of. And so I've always said that about Ella, especially because she's on the spectrum, right? Like I have always talked with her teachers about, like, I want to see what's under the hood of this kid. I want to see like how far we can push her before it's unhealthy or it creates fear and anxiety for her. Because I think we might be limiting what she can actually do. And so I think for my kids, I just want resilience, right? And listen, I didn't want them to have to stand in their room and watch their mom die. I would never, ever want that for any of them.
Right.
But when your kids have to stand in the room and watch their mom die, when they have to crawl in the bed with her after she passes, they're going to be set up very differently for the rest of their life in the way that they look at the death of a pet, the death of a grandparent, right? One of their friends' parents maybe pass away. Like, they're going to look at life so differently because of what they had to go through. Now, that's a trauma that they may have to work through later in life that I can't get them through now through their own counseling, right?
Yeah.
But you can be damn sure as their dad that I'm going to continue to repeat to them, hey, I love you. You're loved. You have value. I'm here for you. How can I help? But they've been pressed on by the wind of life already so hard that I don't know that there's much that I can do from a teaching resilience thing. You know, when we were going through COVID, I had to become a primary parent, a primary caregiver all at the same time. Joe was going through treatments. She had just had a baby. There wasn't a lot that she was able to give energy-wise. So there were a lot of times where I had 3 kids, and I learned to become, a better dad through all that. And one of the things that was so fun was I started letting them go into stores by themselves. At that time, they would have been 11 and 8. And so by stores, I mean, like, they would run into the Dollar General, or they would go into the ice cream shop, and I would send them with cash or credit card, whatever I had, and I would let them do it. And for me, it was like letting out the leash a little bit of freedom, because I wanted them to have those interactions and those experiences with the cashier or with the person at the ice cream shop without me, just so that, again, like, they're developing some of those muscles themselves. That's the kind of resilience and social understanding that I'm talking about at a low level. At a high level, I would never want for a child's parent to pass away for them to have to really build that resistance.
So you're in the car, you pull up to the store, you're in the car, and let them go in and you wait?
Yeah, exactly. Or I can see them, right? Like, they don't know that I'm watching, but I'm watching, right? Like, and I'm watching them perform, right? Because they've got to learn that kind of stuff, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so today, our 11-year-old will work about 1 day a week. We own a business that has a little bodega and like a counter, and we let her come in and work and wipe down tables and hand out food and wash dishes, just so that like she's having some of those interactions with the general public.
Yeah.
And there have been times when the general public has not been kind, right? And so she's had again to learn some of those social like norms, and hey, a little bit of like, hey, not everybody's nice, not everybody's kind, and how are you going to respond, and how do you show up? And
yeah.
And this is your child, Ella, that's on the that's on the spectrum?
This is Easton. This is the 11-year-old.
Okay. I asked that because I've always said, generally speaking, as parents, the most difficult thing, bar none, is striking a balance between giving your child fish and teaching them to fish.
Yeah.
Now, when you add to that a diagnosis,
Yeah.
that balancing act becomes twice as hard, because it's part of you that wants to just catch all the fish for them.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly going through that with my son, both my wife and I, because the extent to which the leash is let go differs from parent to parent. And my wife shared with me something on social media the other day where it was a therapist that said, it is not our job. We are not responsible for our children's happiness. And I was like,
yeah. Oof.
Hold on there. That's,
yeah.
Even more important than their happiness is our job to equip them to find their own.
Yeah.
That's a difficult thing, because you want to like, no, I'm taking a bullet for you.
Yeah.
Just like Johanna did.
Yeah.
And so if you notice, I'm on the edge of my seat as you're saying that, because I'm taking physical and mental notes, because I know that I need strength in that area, because part of me wants to just rush out and like, no. And my son I just started a workout program this week, and I'm going through the lifting of the weights and showing him the form and everything, and there's so much patience that's needed. You can't do it for him. I gotten so much out of you being here already. Just
yeah.
Anyway,
Daryl, it's an amazing conversation. I'm sitting in awe myself. It's beautiful the way you've done this. Let me ask you this. Are you close to, in proximity to family? Do you have family around you? Do you have help with your kids?
So my parents live about 3 hours away, and they haven't been as available probably in my adult life and easily accessible. Johanna's parents, on the other hand, have been very close. They're about 45 minutes away, and they're Nana and Pop, and they're older. So there's some limitations to what they can and can't do. Sure. But they've been a gift. And I would say that Johanna's brother and sister as well. So my in-laws, just as a whole, have been amazing. And then Lynchburg is a special community. Like, I don't know that I'm going to do it justice on this podcast, but it is a very special community of people. And my friends that come here to visit always say that. They're like, man, you guys have a very different type of community. You're looking at about 120,000 people during the day, probably about 85,000 at night. And what that means is like our counties have a little bit of urban sprawl around them. So it's kind of like one big community. There's a lot of faith in our community. So there's a lot of, people that kind of have that as their core basis of like helping their neighbor. So it's pretty special. So I would say, like, between my in-laws and our community here in Lynchburg, I felt loved. I felt like people rallied around us. I felt like people helped us. But like anything, like any tragic situation you go through, that wears off over time, right? So that first week there was everybody here. That second week there were less people here, and on and on and on and on and on. And so what you really get to is this part of the book that I tell my kids about: mind the gap. So there were literally situations where after Johanna died, I didn't see or talk to a certain person, especially via text message, for over a year. And I call that the gap. And it's a visual gap, right? It's like they texted me, hey, I'm sorry your wife passed away in 23. And I didn't hear from them again until 24 when they needed something from me. And so I have written to the kids about minding the gap, because that gap informs me of my responsibility to you in my relationship. And I would say, Brian, like, you and I might have a great relationship. We might be at a distance across the country, but that doesn't mean that we can't stay in like constant relationship or communication. And so often I think what happens is like we feel this responsibility to be the same person to everybody in relationship. And often that's not what's required, right? So I just think that there have been key people throughout the last 5 or 6 years of my life who have shown up. And I talk about that all the time, about showing up. And I have a higher level of responsibility to those individuals, especially in reciprocation and relationship, than maybe somebody that just texted me, "Hey, I'm sorry your wife passed away." And the next thing you texted me is, "Hey, can I borrow the tractor?" So
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's a great story and something for us all to think about. We all have that. Sometimes we create the gap unintentionally, and then you realize, when your friend calls you and you're like, "Hey, how come you haven't called it?"
And own that, right? Like, "Hey, my bad. Like,
yeah,
I should have checked in with you far before this. How are you doing?"
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think that's a key thing to just remind people, anybody listening, if you got someone that you haven't been in touch with for a while, unless you know a dude with some jacked up hair and a DeLorean, you can't go back and get any of the time back. So pick up the phone and call that person right now. Before you do that, give yourself some grace and make the phone call.
Yeah.
And try to live by it. It's easier said than done, but worthwhile, which is I would say that text is for information and a phone call is for conversation. That's a difficult thing to do, but we got to try and do that.
I'm going to keep that one. That's good.
Yeah. And it's a deadly thing, Yeah.
Daryl, have you read the book to your kids, or have they read the book?
So unfortunately, I've got 2 kids that can read. And unfortunately, there were some things in the book that I wanted them to work through much later in life, but they have already read it. So, so my 11-year-old gets to page 18, I believe it is. And she's like, "So my mom and my dad were separated." I was like, "Oh man, we weren't ready for that conversation yet." Because, my theory is like, listen, you as a kid don't remember many conversations with your parents, but you remember experiences, good or bad. And so I wanted to just write down those conversations now so that when their frontal lobe has formed very differently at the age of 30, they're able to understand those conversations in a mature, abstract kind of way. Whereas, when you're 11, you don't have the same ability. They call it a window of tolerance, right? Where their window is pretty small right now of the things that they can understand in an abstract way. But they dove in and they started reading it. And so it created some early conversations for sure. But my hope is like they keep coming back to having more of those conversations. It's just like the sex talk, right? Like we started having the conversation about sex at 8 years old. Obviously, that conversation about sex at 8 years old is way different than when you're 14. For sure. And so it's been an ongoing dialogue as opposed to a one-time conversation. And so my hope is the same for the stuff that I wrote them in this book, right? Like, okay, you might understand it at one level now. Let's keep talking about it as you go, because that's the kind of relationship I want to have with them for the rest of their lives. So,
yeah. We're talking with Daryl Calfee. For those who are listening to us auditorily, I'll spell that for you: DARYL CALFEE. Daryl Calfee. You can reach him at darylcalfee.com, and your contact information, everything's on there. Daryl, if people want to reach out to you for whatever reason, I mean, just the inspiration alone, I'm fascinated. I think you're such a great storyteller, and I know that you talk about that on your website. The fact that it's all about telling stories, right, to convey messages. It's been a great conversation. We're getting close to the end of our hour with you, believe it or not. And Shawn and I are always amazed. We've been doing this for 4 years, and we still get totally blown away by the fact that an hour goes by so quickly, because we just eat this stuff up. I want to talk to you for another hour or two. This is so amazing. It's so big.
Well, congrats on your longevity.
This is the first of many conversations. Yeah.
I hope so. Yeah. Well, most people don't get as far as you guys have. Most people quit early, and you guys have done an amazing job. Of 4 years is something to be really, really proud of.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. I actually heard some guys on ESPN radio. One of them has a podcast, and they were talking about how many dormant podcasts there are in the Apple app, because I guess they don't take them out. And so it has a lot to do with how the show even started. We were invited to be on a podcast. They recorded our episode. It was one of many that these dads recorded. Wow. They didn't upload any of them. So to try and add value to anybody listening or watching, if you're going to do something, being prepared preparation matters, but perfection is overvalued. You know, if
Yeah.
you're going to wait till you're really ready to do something, you might never get it done. And
No.
it's not that we've got it figured out. We're just here, and
I've bought
to have this
I've
time
bought
with you is great.
I've bought so many calendars over the years, and I've never found one that had the day someday in it.
Right.
So,
That's right.
you know, but the
Yeah.
idea that you were able to take this situation, this experience, and put it into and not only into words, but to release a book, to give lessons for others, for your children and for others. It's really admirable, Daryl, and we're really honored and so grateful that you spend an hour with us. We have a question that we're going to ask you. We do this every time at this point in the episode. So we'll throw over to Shawn to ask you the question, and then we'll final thoughts and we'll wrap up.
I'm kind of nervous.
Yeah. And what makes it so good is I'm always anxious because of the guests and their qualities. Can't wait to see what they're going to say. This is no exception.
All right.
Our ability to change the world is limited or dependent upon our ability or willingness to change ourselves. So with that said, give us just one example of a thought or belief you once really believed strongly, but no longer believe to be true.
Okay. So I think the way that I used to look at being values based. So I grew up in a world that said hard work was really important. And hard work was measured often by like physical hard work. Like I would hear my grandfather or the men at my table brag on how hard of a worker somebody was. Like, and that what they meant was like the physical work that they were doing with their hands. And so for me, early in my marriage, you know, in my early 20s, I viewed hard work, or I viewed, you know, the idea of hard work as something that can only be done physically with your hands. And I was at odds with myself at times, because here I am doing marketing and advertising at the age of 22 in New York. And it's the exact opposite of everything that I was told had value as a young man at the dinner table. Right. And so as I've grown and begin to understand things more abstractly, I started to look at my values as, instead of like Lego blocks, which are very rigid and strict, and if you step on them in the middle of the night, they hurt like hell, right? That's how I used to look at my values. So my values have always been hard work, integrity, honesty, those kind of things, right? Showing up for people. And they've always been pretty rigid. And then as I got older, I started to think about them differently because they began to expand. So now today, if you were to ask me, what do I think is one of my values, is it would still be hard work. But what is hard work? Well, hard work is staying up all night to put together a campaign, right? Hard work is caring for a loved one who is sick and dying. Hard work is being able to clean up after your 3 kids when they've just destroyed the house and somebody has the stomach bug, right? Like all of a sudden, hard work is not just being able to dig a fence post hole, right? And so it went from being this really rigid little Lego block in my life to being what I would consider more of an airbag. And what's so cool about that is that it creates a lot more room for other people, right? Rob Bell talks about this all the time, that his faith is more of a trampoline, right? Where it's like, hey, join me on this thing, jump up and down, because, you know, we might argue on some of the springs, but a trampoline still works without all the springs.
Right.
For me, the same idea applies to my values becoming an airbag. I still believe that hard work is one of my core values, but it's expanded so much that it allows other people to stand on that core value with me, and I will respect them in the same way. And I think if I would have known that at 20 or 22, I would have looked at myself differently, but I would have also valued other people differently. I would have made more space for other people. You know, as older men, we know that now, right? Like we have to make more space for other people and the way they view the world. And we have to be more empathetic through that lens. But I think my values expanding to be airbags as opposed to Lego blocks is probably the biggest thing that I've changed.
It's fascinating.
That's the closest thing we've ever had to a perfect answer to that question, considering exactly the way we close out. I'm serious. You'll find out why in a couple seconds. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so as we wrap up this episode, we've been talking with Daryl Calfee. Again, it's DARYLCALFEE, DarylCalfee.com, and you can find his book, Let's Skip the Bull, on his site and also at Amazon, and we'll put it in the show notes as well if people want to click on the link and buy the book and get some value expanded in your life. There it is. Shawn's put it up on the screen for those who can see it. Let's Skip the Bull, with an availability on Amazon button. So as we wrap up this episode, again, fascinated. Thank you, Billy Footwear, for being a part of what we do every day. Billy Price, amazing CEO, took an adversarial situation and turned it into an amazing story and an amazing company that serves millions of people around the world. And this is one of the superheroes that we love talking about. And Daryl, we're going to put you on that list as well, because you're definitely a superhero as far as we're concerned. And so thank you for being here. It's really been meaningful and enriching conversation for me. I've loved every minute of this. So as we wrap, I say, empathy and love, almost more important today than any other time. Be empathetic. You don't know what anybody else is going through. You don't know what they're dealing with. You don't know their situation at home. So have some empathy before you become judgmental. And then if you look at the world through lenses of love, the world's just a much better place. Sometimes, including today, it can be very difficult to always look through the lenses of love. But I promise you, as cloudy as those lenses may get at times, they are lenses of love. So continue to embrace your neighbor with love. With that, I'm going to throw it over to Shawn to wrap us up. Again, thank you, Daryl, so much.
Daryl, thank you again for being here. To each and everyone within the sound of my voice, we thank you so much for joining us. With every single day that we are blessed to see, the value of questions go up every single day. And questions are more powerful than statements. We must fight to remain childlike and avoid being childish. Everybody needs the same thing. We need to be seen. We need to be heard. We need to be loved. And we need to know that we matter. To each and everyone within the sound of my voice, thank you so much. We love you. And we'll see you next time. Daryl, stick around once we sign off, please.
All right. I'm honored and humbled, guys. Thank you both.
Daryl, thank you again, man. So awesome. Thanks, everybody. See you again next week.